All right, little Yeti, don't fail me now. This is at the end of the first day of Lucca, the enormous comics, games, digital gaming, role playing, more comics, massive pop industry convention in Lucca, Italy. And I am here with Narrativa, the company that I work with for the translations of my games, and which specializes in repackaging games to the European audience. Sometimes to the extent of shocking production. Overproduction is one of those words I use when debating with Michele Gelli, and yet he often finds this weird balance between things that I think are insanely overproduced and things that I'm presenting or someone else is presenting that he considers to be insanely underproduced. So you end up with this interesting compromise in most cases. And a really good example, a great example of Michele totally calling it, is when he put out Vincent Baker's Murderous Ghosts in Italian. And inside there are these two booklets, which is exactly how Vincent had built the game to be played with two little rule sets that were separate objects. And they were doing my game Slay With Me in Italian. And he said, we really this ought to be built like Murderous Ghosts. It needs to be these two booklets, and it needs to be the same form factor that I'm doing with Murderous Ghosts. And I was thinking, well, this is kind of intrusive. That's not the way I designed the game to be read and used, and it needs to look like a D&D book from the mid-'70s, one of those little, tacky pamphlet things. But no. He said, what are you thinking? There you are, matted with the newspapers you slept in again, Edwards. This is the real world. People want products. Come on. So they did it, and I'm telling you, okay, first of all, here's the little booklet. See, it's kind of, this is the size in question without foreshortening. And then inside you've got the booklets, and the booklets are really fab with these great illustrations and this wonderful kind of graphic effect going on. And they're eminently usable. It's all the same rules, all the same text, just kind of like laid out in this really kind of usable page-by-page form. And it's awesome. This is exactly the way that Slay With Me ought to be presented textually. And so I'm like, okay, they call it. You called it, Michele. That's how. Now, the big player in this regard for this convention, as far as I'm concerned, is the new or the Narrativa version of The Clay That Woke. And as with so many of our games, me and Paul, the nature of the title kind of baffles a translator. So therefore you end up with some adaptation in title. In this case, Il Silenzio dei Minotauri, which is the silence of the Minotaurs. And as you can see, it has a new cover, also by Nate Marcel. They got a number of extra or additional illustrations by Nate to make it a little bit more of a graphics-heavy book. And they also, it's not too different from the original presentation. In fact, I would say of all the Narrativa books, it's the one that invokes the presentation of the original the most, and pretty much just kind of reproduces the translation of how Paul wanted it read, which is, as you know from the English text perhaps, is deeply personal and deeply idiosyncratic for this game, and altering that just really wouldn't be in its interest. So you end up with pretty much the game inside looking the way that you might be used to, finding one of the new illustrations anyway. And yeah, so it's got a little bit more of a full page spread, kind of a graphics coffee table book, in a good way, kind of presentation with these illustrations scattered around the page and the text wrapping and stuff like that. Again, same illustrator, so it really is very much the Italian The Clay That Woke, unchanged, augmented slightly. And as far as other presentational choices, though, that come with it, it comes in the cool bag, and in the bag with the book are, of course, the tokens And the neat thing about these tokens is that, first of all, the graphics have been slightly altered, so it's impossible to mistake one token for another. They've been color-coded into 4 basic groups, so that certain things, like whether if something can be given to another player or not, what belongs, what comes back to you after a crater draw. The ones for the GM are in black. And as I say, the graphics are changed slightly so that there's really no way to mistake what they are. Let's see, we got the mine, the little cool gifts and stuff. And so yeah, there's just generally a usability effect along or in tandem with this cool, it's a cool bag. So that's a good example of saying, okay, how do we maximize this game in terms of playability, in terms of graphic, class, in terms of perhaps, marketing / packaging, putting it all kind of together in a different combination or a sort of more marketing educated presentation than I, at least, am used to. So there's that. You can see the same thing with Alexandra Sontasca's The Beast, La Creatura. You can see the same thing with their version of Undying, which again has this kind of neat, interior graphic that's really readable, really attractive, and not overwhelming. Most of my games, Spione and Shahida, have also been given this treatment. My version of Trollbabe, right, nice little hardcover with a lot of this really cool interior, sort of no holds barred graphic approach, with lots of cool kind of color graphics in there, which I think really don't detract or distract, but really generate a readability to the diagrammatic instructions that I think works really well. So to show you how far he'll go, though, we have Lovecraft-esque. This con is kind of interesting because there's this big Lucca Game of the Year contest they hold just before the con starts, and everybody thought that the Player's Handbook, the Italian version of the 5th edition D&D Player's Handbook, was just going to walk away with it, and willy-nilly, Lovecraft-esque takes the prize, and that has led to any number of people rushing to the booth who have no idea what narrative is and no idea of anything about it, and then they all want to look at Lovecraft-esque. And so it's being used as kind of this big draw, which is, I guess, what winning an award is for. But look what he did, okay? All right, so you've got Lovecraft-esque, and you've got its interior design with its, kind of interesting, spooky but mundane-ish, perhaps, illos, until you take out Mr. UV light that you get with it. And I don't know if it'll work on the shiny cover. No, you know what? I don't think the shiny cover is going to work in this camera situation. But I think the interior will work better. So if I show you the interior, yeah, and you can see perhaps, there we go. Right, you can see that there's spooky shit all over all the illustrations and pages. And so you've got your kind of mundane, cold, bleak horror in the photographs as they are, and then you use your UV, and then you've got your creepy crawly Lovecraft stuff going on. And that's when I say, really? When does gimmick start, and when does this overproduction just take over? Well, all I have to say is that at the booth, everybody goes, ooh, and picks it up. So say what you will, between the award and the little pretty lights, it's moving Lovecraft-esque. Lots to talk about. I have tons of workshops to do, and I have tons of playing to do, and we'll be filming these things, so there's going to be plenty of content for Adept Play coming out of Lucca. My wonderful friend Paul Sega is here, and he and I have already had all these conversations that I really wish had been mic'd. and sooner or later I might rope them into sitting down and actually, performing for the camera instead. And that is it for now. I'm bootlegging a booth that somebody stopped using at the end of the con. They're breaking down the booth I'm at, and I'm also running low on battery, So this is very much a street corner presentation. Nonetheless, there's no escaping the street corner when you're with me. So I will talk to you later. Lots of content to come.